I have watched that footage every night for 3 years. Not because I want to, because I can't stop. People ask me why I quit, why I moved, why I sleep with the lights on now. I tell them it was the job, the hours, the stress. That is easier than the truth. The truth is that I worked the night shift at Mercy General Hospital for 4 years, and on a Tuesday night in November, Camera 4 showed me something that I have spent every day since trying to find an explanation for. I have not found one, and the closer I got to looking, the worse things became. My name is Daniel Marsh. I work security, and what I saw on that monitor is the reason I will never set foot in that building again. Let me tell you what the job actually looked like before I tell you what happened. Mercy General is a mid-sized hospital in a mid-sized city, 7 floors, about 400 beds. The kind of place that runs 24 hours a day and never fully goes quiet. There is always a hum to it, always a light on somewhere, always footsteps in a corridor. I worked the overnight shift, 11 at night until 7 in the morning. Just me and one other guard named Ray covering the whole building. The security office was a small room on the ground floor near the main entrance. 2 desks, a coffee maker that never worked properly, and a wall of monitors showing feeds from every camera in the building. 16 cameras total. I knew every angle, every blind spot, every place the image got grainy when the lighting was low. I had stared at those screens for 4 years. I knew what normal looked like on every single one of them. Camera 4 covered the east corridor on the 3rd floor. Long hallway, patient rooms on both sides, storage closet at the far end. Nothing remarkable about it. It was one of the quieter feeds. Overnight, 3rd floor east was usually still. The occasional nurse, the occasional family member who had stayed too late. Mostly just the corridor, empty and lit in that flat hospital way that makes everything look the same at 3 in the morning as it does at 3 in the afternoon. I want to be very precise about what I noticed first because the order matters. The first thing was the timestamps. About 6 months into my 4th year, I started noticing that Camera 4 would occasionally drop a few seconds. Not freeze. The image stayed live. The timestamp kept running. But there would be a moment, sometimes 2 or 3 seconds, sometimes closer to 10, where nothing on the feed moved. Not the nurses. Not the distant flicker of a monitor through an open door. Nothing. Like someone had pressed pause on just that one camera while everything else kept going. I reported it to the facilities manager. He said it was a known issue with that camera's connection, intermittent signal drop. He said it had been flagged for repair and would be handled. I logged it and forgot about it. 2 months later, I noticed the second thing. There was a woman on the feed. I do not mean a patient. I do not mean a nurse. I mean a woman who appeared on Camera 4 at irregular intervals throughout the night, sometimes once, sometimes 3 or 4 times, who did not match any staff member I could identify, and who did not behave the way a visitor or patient would behave. She would appear at the far end of the corridor, near the storage closet, just standing, facing down the hall toward the camera. She never moved toward any of the patient rooms. She never interacted with anyone. She was simply there, and then, after a variable amount of time, she was not there. She never walked away on camera. She was present, and then she was absent, with nothing in between. At first I thought shift change, thought she was a staff member I hadn't placed yet. I pulled 3 nights of footage and watched every appearance carefully. She was always there during the timestamp drops. Every single time Camera 4 lost those few seconds. She was standing at the end of that corridor when the feed came back, and when the next drop happened, she was gone. I didn't sleep well after I noticed that. I showed Ray. He watched the footage for a long time without saying anything. Then he said, "She's probably just a family member who found the back stairwell. Some of them figure out the routes." He said it the way a person says something when they want it to be true. I pulled the access logs for the east stairwell on every night she appeared. No badge swipes during those windows. The stairwell door required a badge after 9 at night. There was no way into that corridor from the east end without triggering the log. I did not tell Ray what I found. I wrote it in my personal notebook, and I kept watching. The third thing happened on a Tuesday night in November, in the first hour of my shift. It was quiet. Ray was doing his physical walk of the lower floors. I was at the monitors. I had my coffee. I was watching the feeds the way you watch them after 4 years. Not hard focus, more like peripheral awareness. The way you develop a sense for when something is wrong without being able to say exactly what triggered it. Something on camera 4 was wrong. The corridor was empty. The timestamp was running normally. Nothing was moving. But something about the image felt different. I leaned closer, stared at it. And then I understood what I was seeing. The shadows were wrong, not wrong in a dramatic way. Not wrong in a way I could have pointed to immediately and explained. The lighting in that corridor was fixed. Fluorescent overhead strips, evenly spaced, same every night. The shadows those lights cast were always the same. I had looked at that corridor for 4 years. I knew exactly how the shadows fell on that floor, on those walls. They were falling in a different direction, not dramatically. Maybe 15, 20 degrees off from where they should have been. Like something between the lights and the floor had shifted slightly. Like the geometry of that hallway was slightly different from what it should have been. I sat with that for a long moment, told myself I was tired, told myself it was the camera angle, a reflection, something with the overhead strips. Then the timestamp dropped. 10 seconds, maybe 12. The longest drop I had ever seen from that camera. When it came back, she was there, but this time she was not at the far end of the corridor. She was close, maybe 20 feet from the camera. Close enough that I could see her face clearly for the first time in the weeks I had been watching her. I don't want to describe her face in detail. I have thought carefully about whether I want to put that into words, and I have decided that I don't. What I will say is that her expression was not distressed. It was not aggressive. It was something else entirely, something I have never been able to name precisely in 3 years of trying. The closest I can get is this. It was the expression of a person who is looking at something they already know the outcome of. She was looking directly into the camera. I reached for the radio to call Ray. My hand stopped. I don't know why. It just stopped. I watched the feed for what felt like a long time but was probably less than a minute. She did not move. The shadows behind her were still wrong. The corridor was otherwise empty. Then a nurse walked into frame from the near end of the hall, coming from the nursing station, heading toward one of the patient rooms. She walked directly past the woman, did not slow down, did not look at her, did not react in any way that suggested she was aware of another person standing 2 feet to her left. The nurse went into the patient room and the door closed. The woman was still standing there. I called Ray. I told him to go to 3rd floor east corridor. Now. I told him I needed eyes on something. He was there in 4 minutes. I watched him on the feed, watched him come through the near stairwell door, walk into the corridor, stop, look around. I watched him on camera 4 standing in an empty hallway. She was gone. Ray walked the length of the corridor, checked the storage closet, checked the stairwell at the far end, the one that required a badge swipe, the one that had never logged an entry on any night she appeared. He came back to the security office, and he looked at me for a moment, and then he looked at the monitor, and he said, "What exactly did you see?" I showed him the footage. He watched it twice. He watched the nurse walk past the spot where the woman was standing. He watched the nurse not react. He said the nurse didn't see her. I said, "I know." He said, "That's not possible." I said, "I know." We sat with that for a while. Then Ray said he was going to finish his rounds, and I said that was fine. And he left, and I sat in front of those monitors for the remaining 5 hours of my shift with my eyes on camera 4, and she did not appear again. I started digging the next day. I told myself I was going to find a rational explanation, and I was going to feel foolish, and everything was going to make sense. I pulled 18 months of archived footage from camera 4. It took me 2 weeks watching on my laptop at home during the days before my shifts. I logged every appearance, date, time, duration, position in the corridor. I cross-referenced with the access logs for both stairwells. I cross-referenced with the staff records. Every nurse, doctor, technician, and administrator who had any reason to be on 3rd floor east during overnight hours. She matched no one in the staff records. The access log showed nothing on any of the nights she appeared. But the thing I found that I was not looking for, the thing that I have not told anyone until now, was what happened when I mapped her appearances against the patient records for that floor. Every time she appeared on camera 4, a patient on the 3rd floor east died within 48 hours. Not on the nights she didn't appear. Not in other parts of the hospital. 3rd floor east, within 2 days of every appearance. Every single time. 18 months of data. Not one exception. I sat with that number for a long time. I checked it 4 times because I needed it to be wrong. It was not wrong. I thought about going to hospital administration. I thought about what I would say. I thought about the footage, which showed a woman that a nurse had walked directly through without reacting. I thought about the access logs that showed no entry. I thought about the shadow angles that should not have been possible with fixed overhead lighting. I thought about the fact that she had looked directly into the camera, and I thought about something else, something that I had not let myself think about clearly until I was sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the afternoon with 18 months of data in front of me. She had been getting closer. In the earliest footage, she was always at the far end, near the storage closet, 100 yards from the camera, give or take. Over 18 months, her appearances had gradually shifted, closer each time. Not dramatically, not in a way I would have noticed without the log. But the data was clear. She had been moving toward the camera over a period of 1.5 years. On the night Ray and I watched her together, she had been 20 feet away. I quit 2 weeks later. I gave a notice, cited personal reasons, shook hands with the facility's manager and the head of security, and I did not go back. I moved 8 months after that. Different city. I told people it was for a new job, which was partly true. What I have never told anyone, not Ray, not my family, not the therapist I saw for 6 months after I left, is what I found when I looked up the history of the 3rd floor East Wing of Mercy General. The East Wing had been a separate building once, built in the 1940s, connected to the main hospital in the 1970s during an expansion. Before it was a hospital wing, it had been something else. The records were not easy to find. It took me 3 months of searching through county archives and old newspaper files. Before it was part of Mercy General, that building had been a private sanatorium. It had operated from 1941 to 1968, when it was closed following an investigation into patient treatment that the newspaper records described in terms that were careful and formal, and that still managed to make clear that what had happened there was not good. The investigation had centered on the East Corridor, 3rd floor, and the woman who had run the sanatorium, who had been the subject of most of the complaints in the investigation, who had died in 1972 before any formal charges were filed, had worked out of an office at the far end of that corridor. Near the storage closet, I found a photograph of her in a 1953 newspaper article about the sanatorium's expansion. She was standing in front of the building, slightly turned away from the camera. I recognized the way she stood before. I recognized her face. I closed my laptop and I have not opened those files since. The footage is still on an external hard drive in my closet. I have not watched it in 2 years. I tell myself I am going to delete it. I have not deleted it. I don't know what she was. I don't know why she appeared when she appeared, or what the connection was between her presence and what happened to those patients. I don't know if she was aware of me in any meaningful sense, or if looking into the camera was something she did regardless of who was watching. I know that she was getting closer. I know that I left before I found out what happened when she reached the camera. I check the footage sometimes. Not the old footage. I don't do that anymore. I check to make sure the hard drive is still in the closet, that it hasn't moved, that it's exactly where I left it. It always is, so far.